One of the most memorable periods in history is December 1938. During this, a German scientist, after years of research, discovered nuclear fission. Sadly, though, this groundbreaking discovery was during the reign of a totalitarian dictator. Around this time, German leader Adolf Hitler had already declared war in Europe. With this discovery, both Nazi Germany and the Allied forces could dream of creating an atomic bomb. Franklin D. Roosevelt's apprehension of the fact that Hitler might first have a bomb then led him to commission the Manhattan Project. Despite a persistent public perception that US scientists are already forging ahead of their German counterparts, the Germans never were able to make a bomb, even amidst the fears of the Allies at the time. This failure was a result of Germans' firmly established myopic beliefs in physics, politics, and their current military situations. The group of German scientists were rounded up in 1945 and transferred to Britain to be held in custody. While in detainment, they got news about the Hiroshima bombing, and this prompted them to recount their experiences trying to make a bomb to no avail. Little did they know that there were hidden microphones. One of the ways Hitler got it wrong was because he failed to establish a good communication link with the best scientists around him as compared to his American counterpart FDR and the English Prime Minister at the time, Churchill. Both men enjoyed great input from their respective available scientists around that time. Hitler's defining contribution to the era of nuclear weapons was the curiosity and fear he instilled in many people about what it might do. And this fear was an important component on which Roosevelt based his decision. The German scientists retained unilateral influence for their research on uranium as part of their country's military defense. This was the case everywhere, but the situation of things in the US and the UK were much better as the scientists were able to coordinate their war efforts. And though Germany was under full control by Hitler, the nuclear scientists distanced themselves from his authority, unlike their counterparts from the Allied countries. Some of the best of them continued their research and chose subordinates with little concern for the potential outcome of the battle. Although they were not united in the pursuit, the German scientists made much progress as they already understood the separation process of U-235 and already identified plutonium that completes the two major sources of nuclear energy. Their shortcoming was the inability to get the needed quantity during the war times. They focus their efforts on achieving chain reactions and have the probability of yielding a uranium engine, believing nuclear power production was a more practical result. Holding this school of thought was what led them to make grave mistakes that might have been corrected by a larger, more collegial effort. Their acquaintance of the erroneous conclusion that graphite would not work in a reactor made them depend solely on the heavy water from a plant in Norway that was subsequently targeted with bombs by the Allied forces. Werner Heisenberg, just 40 years old in 1941, was the most influential figure in the German campaigns of that period. He was his country's foremost scientist in the field of theoretical nuclear physics. It is necessary to know more about him and his actions between the years of 1941 and 1942 to be able to know just how close Hitler was to a nuclear bomb, but he never had it. Hey, if you like the video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more. By military orders at the outbreak of the war in 1939, Heisenberg was made to work on the uranium project problem. He acknowledged the importance of the discovery of Hans Strassmann on nuclear fission, just as all his German contemporaries did. However, he had already told Enrico Fermi that it was unlikely to make weapons in time for the war about to ensue, hence the outcome cannot be influenced. He was comforted by this conviction when he started working on the uranium project, and he fantasized about seeing his country as the pioneer in using the discovered atomic energy peacefully after the war. This he did not doubt until the US dropped the bomb on Hiroshima to all but confirm his worst fear that the German scientists were way too far behind. Heisenberg told the War Office already in December 1939 that the fission process can be used for producing enormous energy based on the currently available facts that have been determined, and that the most secure means of constructing a capable reactor is by enriching the U-235 isotope. Heisenberg similarly thought, like Hahn, any useful progress on the uranium project, like separating it into usable quantities, could only be achieved after the war, and he was happy to leave it to others to find. Heisenberg claimed later in 1941 that he was sure the path to nuclear power would be open, and that there isn't going to be any chance of bomb making in Germany, at least till the war ends. Now, overstating the self-reliance of Heisenberg's position wouldn't be right, for it rested in part on failures of scientific understanding. This is quite evident with the way he isolates the theoretical from the experimental aspects of physics, even in his work on the chain reaction for nuclear power. This operating style of Heisenberg was clearly in contrast to that of the founder of Los Alamos, Robert Oppenheimer, who had a solid foundation in experimental physics before later focusing on theoretical physics. His influence naturally flows through all that worked with him, but Heisenberg was unable to replicate this in Germany. In 1941, Heisenberg decided to visit Niels Bohr at Copenhagen because of all the conflicting thoughts on his mind. He decided to go pour out his soul and seek counsel from his former teacher and fellow physicist of sufficient experience and influence. Heisenberg's likely goal when he went to see Bohr in October was to discuss the possibility for physicists around the world to decide to avoid the catastrophe that can result from the making of the atomic bomb, especially if the Allied forces would be willing to stop fighting if they could be sure that the Germans have not developed the nuclear weapon yet. We don't have to presume Heisenberg's strictly humanitarian intent here. In one of his statements after the war, he recounted how he had hoped the Germans emerged victorious, after which the good ones among them will effectively take care of the Nazis. Unfortunately, if other people got the bomb before then, that dream could not be fulfilled. Regardless of his exact goal, he was not able to accomplish it because Hitler's war had already divided the teacher and his former favorite pupil in more than one way. Bohr was even suspicious of Heisenberg due to his actions of supporting his country's invasion of Poland and his giving a lecture in Denmark that is already under the control of Germany. To make matters worse, the lecture was not attended by Danish scientists, and also he was constrained to be careful and not to say anything that could potentially put his life at risk. Bohr and Heisenberg's debate centered on whether it was acceptable or not for physicists to focus on the uranium and nuclear power, as it could tilt the balance of the war and in turn could change the outcome. The conversation shocked Bohr and naturally concluded that Germany had made significant strides in the development of nuclear weapons, according to Heisenberg. All Heisenberg's efforts to correct the false impression afterward proved abortive, and he was probably unable to win Bohr's complete trust in the process. Heisenberg knew this was a mistake, even though its consequences were understated. As it was, the conversation failed entirely, and it was no surprise Bohr had no proposal for international scientific restraint. Instead, it was the erroneous impression that the Germans were trying hard to make a bomb that propagated, and this even worsened the case with the Allied forces and strengthened their resolve. This surreal result of Heisenberg's Copenhagen expedition, however, does not negate the reality that he and his consulted German colleagues seem to have been the only scientists to seek the possibility of none of the nations possessing the bomb. The reason why the German physicists were hesitant to press for a bomb aside the misconceptions is in no thanks to Adolf Hitler, who is the consequence of almost everything in Germany during the war. All who worked with him operate with a high level of prudence due to his personality. No one is ready to lose his or her head over Hitler's over-expectation of any project he's convinced about. This came to play as his senior German physicists were unwilling to press their master for support concerning the nuclear project. They believed it was better not to attract his attention if his desired result is not guaranteed, since he's the type of person who believes in the weapons he has used before while he was a soldier in the First World War. He's, however, open-minded towards the idea of any wonder or new weapon that has a 100% success rate, but which one of his subordinates is willing to take that chance? Hitler was very traditional and always profoundly wary of experts and academic professionals. He also has a muddled-up view of nuclear physics, which was hopelessly confused by the pathological anti-Semitism that made him label it Jewish physics. Speer knew Hitler was capable of moving from presumed cynicism to ludicrous over-anticipation, much as he did with the V-2 rockets used against London in 1944. The uranium case was, however, on another level entirely, and Speer and the scientists successfully ensured its secrecy from Hitler's volatile attention. The uranium project was seldomly discussed in official protocol reports. It was later known that the only time it was talked about was at a conference in mid-1942. There, it was decided that the project will be funded, even though it will no longer have wartime value at that period. Speer wanted to give the scientists the little financial support requested. When Hitler got wind of the idea, it was extremely strange to his intellectual capacity and was soothed with the report that this new idea has nothing to offer his campaign. Speer and Heisenberg entered an official agreement which culminated in the physicists given overriding priorities, but only for work at the research level. This ushered in the period in which the German physicists focused on the uranium project, since they've been assured that their science will be duly protected from Hitler's war. There was a great deal of decency in their scientific dealings and research. However, with this all in place, Nazi Germany would still have been far behind the Americans in the development of this nuclear bomb, even if Speer, Heisenberg, and a host of other scientists have been able to successfully convince Hitler, and he had given his full approval. This is because the Americans had already taken the bold decision some 8 months earlier and proceeded in their pursuit accordingly. So, at their very best, the German physicists could only have gotten the job done at a much later time. The German scientists demonstrated their weakness in the following respects. 1. In terms of available numbers and scientists and engineers and their quality. 2. The availability of large research instruments and infrastructures, like a cyclotron, to help them learn about plutonium. 3. In their organizational flexibility and the volume of industrial resources at their disposal. And 4. The inability to guard against incessant airstrikes. The Germans were unable to develop the rumored nuclear bomb due to the fact that their best physicists do not have enough motivation to forge ahead on the weapon endeavor or to correct the repetitive mistakes that have been holding them back. Also, Hitler was Hitler. Another contributing factor is the influence of people like Speer, who's got other priorities. If Germany had tried to develop a nuclear bomb at that time, they would have failed tremendously because all was not working right, and they were at the wrong place at the wrong time with the project. FDR later got to discover that the Hitler he knew was a military and political genius, rather than the person he had assumed to be overly dependent on the weapons he already trusted, slow to support new ideas, scornful of Jewish physicists, and terrifying to all remaining German physicists. He was the victor on all fronts and could not be stopped on his road to Moscow. He is one with many resources at his disposal, human, industrial, and scientific. If he wanted to, why should he not be far ahead? Why did he choose not to? Well, he fell on the wrong side of history, and the opposite can be said for Roosevelt. Retracing all that transpired, one can vividly see Germany didn't even start the race for the nuclear bomb before they sat it out due to Adolf's influence. The many bright minds never really got to try their best. Hey, thank you for watching the video. Remember, give us a like, subscribe, and make sure to hit the bell so you see when we put out new videos. As always, y'all have a good one.